Hello everyone! What would happen if a meteorite hit a young woman on her wedding day and then aliens invaded the Earth? Today's animated movie will give an original answer to these and many other questions. Out in the vast expanse of space, a planet blows up, shattering into countless fragments. Among this debris, hurtling through the cosmos, one glowing piece is on a collision course with Earth. Down on Earth, researchers stationed in Antarctica spot this celestial body and calculate that it's headed straight for Modesto, a town in California.
We actually have one. Code Nimoy. I repeat, Code Nimoy!
The morning light fills Susan Murphy's room in Modesto as her friends and mom burst in. Turning on the TV, the weather anchor happily reveals his wedding plans for the day and openly expresses his love for his bride, Susan. Hearing his heartfelt confession, she can't help but smile. Susan is glammed up with makeup as she readies herself for the big ceremony. She's taken to the church, where the wedding is to take place. Upon arrival, her father and future mother-in-law welcome her, and a buzz of excitement fills the air as everyone looks forward to the wedding getting underway. Susan is getting ready for a honeymoon, with plans for the newlyweds to jet off to Paris. The young woman dreams of settling in Paris and then traveling all over the world. Susan heads over to the gazebo where she sees her soon-to-be husband, Derek. They chat about their upcoming trip, but Derek drops a bombshell, saying that their plans have been scrapped. Instead of flying to Paris, they'll be heading to Fresno, a small town in the US. Derek's got an audition lined up there for the position of the local news anchor. Susan tries her best to feel happy for him, but her disappointment is hard to conceal. She manages to swallow her frustration and assures Derek she's proud of him. Susan then says that seeing each other before the ceremony is bad luck, so Derek leaves. Left alone, Susan sinks into a melancholy state until an unexpected visitor interrupts her solitude. Susan's mother looks around for the bride and discovers her daughter looking disheveled and covered in dirt. Susan manages to slip away from the meteorite without her mother noticing the mishap. Just as they are entering the church, a black government van pulls up to the building. As the ceremony begins, Susan's skin starts emitting a strange turquoise glow, and then it gets worse.
Oh no. Derek?
Guests panic and scatter in all directions when they see a 50-foot tall bride. Amidst the chaos, a beam falls on Derek, crushing him, and the church collapses under Susan's enormous size. She grabs Derek in her massive hand, attempting to move him away from the unfolding disaster. Meanwhile, government helicopters circle overhead, and agents hurriedly move about. Suddenly, Susan finds herself tied by ropes, causing the groom she was holding to slip from her palm and plummet downward. The weather anchor is saved by a trampoline, while the military is trying to apprehend him. Susan is hit with a tranquilizer dart, causing her body to slump to the ground. Federal agents swarm over her immense body, with the whole thing looking like a scene from Gulliver's Travels.
Derek?
Susan drifts off to sleep after being tranquilized and wakes up in a spacious cell. As she gets out of bed, it automatically folds into the wall, transforming the room into an elevator. Before long, Susan finds herself in a plain room, furnished with only 2 chairs and 2 tables. One pair of furniture is oversized, while the other is regular sized. Susan accidentally breaks one of the smaller chairs with her large foot. She suddenly senses another presence in the room, and out of nowhere, a peculiar gooey substance, along with a spoon, appears on one of the tables. Apparently, that's what counts as food here. A tiny insect emerges from behind the food and greets Susan with a friendly hello. Startled, Susan tries to swat the creature with the spoon, but it skillfully evades her and asks not to hit him, but ends up unconscious on the table. Overwhelmed by surprise and fear, Susan takes a step back and accidentally steps into a strange slime, causing her to lose her balance. The giantess manages to peel the tiny creature off her soul.
Hi there! Ah, my back!
Suddenly, a third creature, resembling an amphibian, appears out of thin air. The friendly neighbors of the giant woman ask her name and then settle in for a meal. Their tiny dining table is showered with food from an overhead tube. Susan attempts to convince herself that none of this is real and takes a step back. At one point, she unintentionally bumps into an odd, furry barrier, only to discover it's yet another resident of the chamber, a massive insectosaurus. The other creatures ask Susan not to startle him. Gradually, the amphibian creature begins to soothe the anxious giant. Meanwhile, Susan is panicking, bumping into walls in a frantic search for an exit. Suddenly, one of the doors open to reveal a military man in a jetpack. He swiftly orders everyone to their cells. This gentleman introduces himself as General W.R. Monger and takes Susan on a tour. The facility she now finds herself in was established back in 1950. Its primary purpose is to keep the existence of monsters under wraps. Susan has been classified as one of these creatures, for rather obvious reasons. Susan insists that she's just a regular human and poses no threat whatsoever. As if to counter her own words, she accidentally takes down a tiny helicopter circling around her head. General Monger explains that Susan is now stuck here for good, and there's no way for her to contact the outside world. She's escorted past some unusual characters in the facility. A genius professor with an insect-like head called Dr. Cockroach, an ancient fish-ape hybrid known as Missing Link, a blobby goo named Bob, and a gigantic insect named Insectosaurus. Susan has seen them all before. They place Susan in a new room that has a cute kitten poster on the wall. At this point, she feels sad and asks to bring her back home to her family. Monger tells her to accept her situation and gives her a government-issued name, Ginormica. Susan is left alone in her room. The story then shifts back to outer space, where we see a weird-looking spaceship in suspended animation.
Begin reanimation sequence.
A huge, four-eyed alien creature comes to life and hears that quantonium has been discovered on Earth. At that moment, a meteorite that hits Susan appears on the screen. The evil alien Galaxar sends a robot probe to Earth. He wants to lay his tentacles on quantonium at any cost. In the following scene, we find a young couple inside a car sharing a romantic moment in the countryside. Suddenly, a shining light streaks across the sky above them. This object crashes not too far off and then bursts into flames. Without hesitation, the girl decides to investigate. In her haste, the guy follows her but breaks his ankle. The girlfriend carries him in her arms and helps him reach the rim of the resulting crater. Amidst the billowing smoke, a colossal robotic eye fixes its gaze upon them. Early in the morning, the military, along with the President of the United States, arrives at the site of the UFO crash. There now stands an alien structure with that very eye at its pinnacle, the one that watched the couple. The president, flanked by 2 attack helicopters and under the watchful gaze of numerous soldiers, climbs stairs to a podium to establish contact. The nation's leader welcomes the robot with the Vulcan salute and initiates contact with the aliens in quite an unexpected manner. Suddenly, an enormous hand extends from the spacecraft. When the president decides to greet it with a handshake, the robot swiftly smashes the podium, transforms into its full form, and launches its invasion. The president manages to escape the collapsing staircase just in time. The armed forces unleash a barrage of machine gun fire, aviation attacks, and missiles. However, not a single projectile breaches the protective force field surrounding the invader. The military retreats, and the president quickly hides in his helicopter. He fires 2 shots from his gun at the robot, probably to at least look brave. There's a commotion at HQ. At the emergency meeting, the generals decide to declare war on the robot. Suddenly, General Monger shows up and puts forward his plan to solve the crisis. He sees that conventional weapons won't make a difference here. The general wants to use monsters to defeat the robot. Then he briefly tells everyone present about his top-secret prison for mysterious creatures. The mere mention of it amounts to a federal crime in America. Monger introduces his monsters. The Insectosaurus, a larvae exposed to radiation. The Missing Link is a 20,000-year-old fishman. Dr. Cockroach, a brilliant scientist and victim of his own experiments in crossing humans with insects. An intelligent jelly mass known as Bob. And, of course, the protagonist, Ginormica. The general proposes to form a team of monsters and send it to deal with the alien. The president gives the go-ahead. Meanwhile, the monsters are playing cards in their cell. The Missing Link, with the help of Insectosaurus, easily beats the simple-minded Bob, while Dr. Cockroach performs strange experiments on Susan. Ginormica hopes to find a way to shrink, but the scientist's machine made from improvised means doesn't work. The monsters tell Susan that not a single one of them has left the prison over all that time. The Missing Link doesn't believe that getting out of here is an option.
Good news, monsters! You're getting out!
Right at this moment, General Monger leads the team to the plane and briefs them on the way. He promises the monsters freedom if they do well against the alien threat. The newly appointed saviors of Earth board the plane and fly off on their mission. Insectosaurus arrives a bit late for the showdown since it had to be moved separately, mainly because of its gigantic size. The aircraft lands in the vicinity of San Francisco. People are quickly evacuating from the area where the UFO has touched down. The monsters are deployed near the aggressive, hulking alien. The general cautions the monsters to keep the robot damage to a minimum and flies away. Susan sees the robot and dashes off to find refuge in the heart of town. The giant mechanical monster tries to squash the missing link, Dr. Cockroach, and Bob. Bob isn't quick enough to escape from under its foot, but his jelly-like consistency keeps him intact. Dr. Cockroach sends the missing link to the ruined city and heads there himself. The robot finds Susan and scans her with a beam, then smashes the nearby building and hurls stones at the giantess. She flees, narrowly avoiding chunks of pavement and cars flying at her. Scaling buildings and navigating rooftops, Susan tries to outrun her pursuer. Eventually, she comes up with a clever idea, fashioning makeshift roller skates from 2 cars and speeding away on them. Meanwhile, the missing link enters the city through the sewer system. Dr. Cockroach catches up to him aboard a modified jet-powered tram and brings him along. Along the way, they also pick up Bob, who clings awkwardly to his friends, causing the tram to tumble off a bridge into the water. Susan, on the other hand, skates past the evacuation area, quickly making her way down the highway. A truck driver crossing the bridge gets distracted by Susan and loses control of the vehicle. This results in the truck overturning and completely blocking the road. At this moment, the robot draws nearer to the bridge. Susan runs up to the truck and tries to help the driver, but at that moment the bridge is attacked by the alien. He tries to put the woman into his grinding mouth, but just then Insectosaurus comes to the rescue. He releases a jet of snot from its nose into the robot. The blinded alien slows down for a while. Right then, the rest of the monster team arrives on the bridge. The massive robot grabs Susan with its claw, but the powerful woman manages to pry it open. The bridge continues to crumble, but Susan heroically rescues the people stuck in their cars. The missing link tries to help by leaping onto the robot's armor, but a force field quickly tosses him aside. Dr. Cockroach steps up, sneaking inside the robot's massive jaws, and reaches the control center. He connects a couple of wires, causing the alien eye to cast a beam that disorients Insectosaurus. Susan tells Bob to get rid of the dividers between the lanes and help people get off the bridge. Bob gets to work munching through the concrete blocks. With trapped people driving to safety, the courageous woman holds the mechanical claw back to prevent it from causing further damage to the road. When everyone leaves the bridge, Susan grabs the ropes holding the claws and gives them a strong tug. This causes the robot to lose its balance and tumble into the water. Just in the nick of time, Susan rescues the missing link, and Dr. Cockroach escapes the robot head. Galaxar watches the unfolding events. His ship computer informs him that they couldn't retrieve the Quantonium, and displays Ginormica's satisfied expression. The 4-eyed villain gets enraged and orders a second robot to fetch the substance. However, the supercomputer responds that the robots aren't up to the task. A carbon-based life form named Susan had gained incredible strength along with her colossal size.
Set a course to Earth. I will retrieve the Quantonium myself.
The monster team flies back from the successful mission, engaging in a lively conversation. Ginormica is glowing with contentment, while the tough missing link worries about his contribution, despite his constant claims of being the ultimate embodiment of masculinity. Meanwhile, Susan wants to return to her normal, quiet life. She's confident that her gigantism is only temporary and believes Derek can help find a solution. The plane touches down, bringing Susan back to her hometown. The general has instructed the local police to treat her well. Once home, Susan extends an invitation to her new friends to visit her. Their first introduction to society gets off to a rocky start when Ginormica accidentally crushes the fence with her foot. Susan's family warmly welcomes her on the porch, though they cast cautious glances towards her new monster friends. In a burst of excitement, Bob accidentally swallows Susan's mom, but fortunately, he quickly spits her out. The rest of the monsters try to act politely. Susan notices Derek's not around and finds out he's at work. Ginormica kindly asks to feed her guests and leaves to find her fiancé. During her absence, the creatures try to entertain the humans and befriend them, but the people become frightened and try to hide.
Anyone care for an atomic gin fizz? It's got quite a...
Eventually, the guests just scatter out of fear. During the TV weather report, Derek bids farewell to Modesto and reveals his plan to move to Fresno. Suddenly, a massive hand emerges through an open window right behind him. Susan enthusiastically grabs the small anchor, but their reunion is off to a rocky start. Susan unwittingly squeezes Derek to the point of bone crushing and accidentally knocks his head against the window opening. Then she finally puts her fiancé on a nearby roof and apologizes for her clumsiness. She explains that she isn't quite used to her size and strength yet, but she hopes they can be together again. However, Derek isn't thrilled with her newfound superhuman abilities. Susan wants to handle the situation together, but her self-absorbed fiancé decides it's best for them to part ways. Although he once thought they were a family, Ginormica begs him to stay, but he leaves. With tears in her eyes, she wanders outside the city and sits right on the roof of a gas station. That's where her teammates find her. They try to lie that the party went great, but they don't sound convincing. With a sad sigh, the missing link says that he and his friends will never be accepted by society. Then the fishman asks Susan about Derek. Ginormica tells them what happened. She's disappointed in her selfish ex-fiancé. Susan realizes that she's better off without Derek. She gives an inspirational speech to her friends about how special they are. Then out of nowhere, a strange gravitational force beams down from the sky, snatching Susan and hoisting her up into an enormous spaceship. Insectosaurus attempts to rescue her by shooting snot from his nose, but he gets zapped by an energy ball from the spaceship. The colossal creature crashes to the ground, and Susan vanishes into the massive ship's hold. Susan wakes up and finds herself among hundreds of inactive robot probes. Some sort of mechanism immediately arrives to pick her up and imprison her in a cage. Galaxar shows up there as well.
To the extraction chamber!
Susan and the wicked alien advance down the corridor. Galaxar accuses her of taking something from him that doesn't belong to her. He tells her about the universe's most powerful substance, quantonium. Galaxar is on a relentless hunt for it. Susan becomes outraged when she learns what led Galaxar to wreck San Francisco and harm Insectosaurus. On her second try, she successfully breaks through the force field and reaches the intruder, breaking free from her restraints and chasing Galaxar.
Ha! That should stop your puny... Computer, close them all!
She finally catches up with Galaxar, but the alien succeeds in locking her inside the extraction chamber. The computer drains Susan's energy and shrinks her down in size. All of Susan's powers transfer to the villain, who's set on rebuilding his civilization on Susan's home planet. His own was ironically destroyed by Galaxar himself. The alien cloning procedure kicks off, yielding thousands of well-armed duplicates from the incubation chambers. Galaxar's forces launch an assault on Earth, with the leader himself appearing as a holographic projection to communicate with humanity. His message, broadcast on TV, declares his intention to invade the planet and wipe out its inhabitants, causing widespread panic among the people. All this time, the monsters have been near Insectosaurus. He has been lying still for a long time. It seems that a kind of cocoon has formed around him. The missing link suggests going to the ship, rescuing Susan, and teaching the alien a lesson. General Monger equips the monsters with jetpacks, with enough fuel for a single journey. He brings them on an airplane to the UFO, and offers them some parting words. He mentions that he's been their warden for 50 years, but times have changed. With a salute, he also assures them that he'll come get them. The airlock swings open, and the monster team launches into action. The general distracts the enemy and draws their fire. The alien ship releases a massive energy ball, similar to the one that previously took down Insectosaurus. The pilot performs a series of daring maneuvers, but still takes a hit. Suddenly, the control panel erupts in a deafening explosion.
That's why I always wear a parachute, Lieutenant.
The two land right on Insectosaurus, who stirs into motion. In the spaceship, the alien clones get into dropships and prepare to attack the Earthlings. That's where the monsters arrive as well. Bob quickly does a stealthy reconnaissance using his stretchy eye and calls the others out of hiding. The trio tries to move as sneakily as possible. Meanwhile, Galaxar is trying to control his clone army. It's not so easy when everyone looks exactly the same. However, after 1,000 tries, he successfully singles out the right soldier and orders him to get rid of Susan because he no longer has any use for her. The clone takes the former Ginormica away. The monsters watch as more clones of Galaxar emerge from the machine. They notice the greatly diminished Susan as well. Bob suggests an idea. The trio falls in line with the aliens and tries to act like them. At first, the monsters think it won't work, but the clones have clearly not inherited the intelligence of the original. Suddenly, the trio of monsters appears in front of the clone who leads Susan. She's happy to see her friends, but she doesn't show it. The missing link tells the clone to hand the prisoner over to them, but he thinks the missing link is a defective copy and wants to incinerate him as well. He tells Dr. Cockroach and Bob to take care of it, as for some reason, he sees nothing fishy about them. He even hands over a pass and a weapon to the monsters. Without hesitation, Bob tests out the blaster and knocks the clone out cold. Susan thanks her friends for rescuing her, and the missing link notes that the monsters must stick together. The former Ginormica says that she's ordinary now. Dr. Cockroach wants to say that she'll always be a monster to them, but the approaching Galaxar clones don't let him finish. The scientist ends the sentence by cursing carbon-based life and shouting, "Hail Galaxar!" not to look suspicious. Moving along the ship, the monsters discuss their plan for saving Earth. Dr. Cockroach suggests that they should destroy the UFO while it's still airborne, before it launches a full-scale assault on their home planet. To accomplish this, the team must locate the central power core. Bob decides to ask the nearest clone for its location, and the clone readily gives them directions. Upon reaching their destination, Dr. Cockroach accidentally fires his blaster and knocks out one of the clones. This is noticed by the others and Galaxar himself. He orders to destroy all monsters. The clones rush into action, but the team fights back. The missing link scatters the incoming enemies with his hands. Susan fires her blaster, and as for Bob has a unique fighting style.
You want to hurt my friends? You'll have to go through me!
The team defeats an entire unit of aliens, but they're quickly replaced by another wave of clones. Or rather, 3 of them. Bob comes to the rescue once again by transforming himself into a giant sticky rope, attaching to the ceiling and lifting his friends up. Together, the team enters the central computer room. It looks like a massive glowing blue brain. Inside, there's a tricky security system, but Dr. Cockroach immediately recognizes it and tries to hack it. More than anything, the hacking process resembles a dance mat game. Finally, Doc reveals what degree he has.
Dance!
The security protocol is breached, and the ship initiates the self-destruction process. The ship's computer refuses to launch an invasion of Earth. Galaxar wants to take all the Quantonium and flee in an escape pod. Susan and the monsters outpace the clones as they head toward the closing doors. In a last-minute twist, the missing link steals a flying bike and comes to the rescue. Unfortunately, all 4 of them can't fit onto the bike and end up falling right at the door, which locks in front of their faces. Only Susan manages to slip through the tight opening. The monsters ask Ginormica to find General Monger, but she refuses to abandon her friends. With just 4 minutes left before the entire ship is obliterated, Susan stumbles upon hover skates nearby. She zooms toward Galaxar, darting through the holes in the door she had created the last time she chased the alien. Susan maneuvers through a compartment full of robots attempting to grab her with their mechanical claws. Swiftly, she zooms past them, causing the robots to fall on each other and explode. Susan leaves the compartment, soaring around the ship and narrowly avoiding a blast from its massive energy cannon. Finally, she incapacitates Galaxar with a skillful throw. Galaxar drops his weapon, slumps to the ground, and starts to regain consciousness. Just as Ginormica arrives, hovering on a single skate, Susan demands that he release her friends. But Galaxar's pod and his Quantonium are ready to depart. Susan leaps onto the escaping Galaxar and brings him down. In a desperate move, she pokes him in the eye and grabs a blaster from the ground. The villain insists that there's nothing Susan can do now, but
I wouldn't be so sure. And the name is Ginormica.
Saying that, she shoots right at the container with Quantonium, and it falls on her head again. 1 minute is left before the ship self-destructs. In the collapsing compartment, 3 monsters are already saying goodbye to each other. A huge container falls on top of them, but at the last moment, it's picked up by Susan, who's gigantic again. She scoops her friends up, and like Superwoman, smashes through the wall of the ship and then holds onto its edge. The monsters are once again hanging by a thread with 30 seconds left before destruction. The general didn't show up to save the team, and the monsters go down. Dr. Cockroach concludes that the general must be dead.
Or late!
Saved by the general and Insectosaurus, the team bravely flies around the burning spaceship, and it blows to pieces. Galaxar doesn't make it away in time. At Susan's house, the monsters are greeted like heroes. The women scream when they see the missing link, but this time, with adoration instead of fear. Derek shows up in the crowd, but he has come not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer one. He says he doesn't blame Susan for what happened, even though when Susan got bigger, she ruined everything that was between them. Derek also reveals that he will get a job on national TV if he can interview Ginormica. He also promises to be with her again. Susan's response is quick. She dumps him, literally.
Goodbye, Derek.
Susan's ex-fiancé lands in Bob's jelly-like body. The unwitty monster then dumps Derek too, and says he's leaving him for pineapple jelly. Bob is still true to himself to the end.
It's over.
Turn it off.
The general calls the monsters back into action because a snail has gotten into the nuclear reactor and is now slowly making its way toward Paris to wreak havoc. The team accepts a new mission and flies away into the sunset. This animated movie not only features multiple references to Star Trek, but also pays homage to monsters from classic horror movies of the 50s and 60s. And that's not the full extent of its Easter eggs. When Galaxar announces his plans to colonize Earth, we can see a scene from Madagascar on a big screen in the upper left corner. As always, check out the movie name in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to get even more cool recaps. In the meantime, tell us in the comments, which movie monsters do you find the most interesting and memorable?